My name is Sudesh Kannan. I'm with Searle. We're going to talk about cybersecurity, how to protect your factory, and save technology costs. There's somehow this myth that you need to spend a lot of money to make your company secure from cyber attacks, and that's not true. We'll show you a logical way. Please share this presentation with your team members, not just IT people outside. It's very logical, very straightforward. We have shared our contact information, and please go ahead and check out other details that we have embedded in this presentation. I want to talk about Ron Searle, my co-presenter first. He's the president and founder of BCS International since 1986. What I love about him is he's the virtual CIO and virtual CISO for many, many companies and schools in the Chicago area. And he has a lot of common sense. He does not use technology for the sake of technology. He looks at the business objectives. He looks at his organizational tolerance, risk tolerance. So he's very, very important and unique person. I've been in cybersecurity for the past 10 years, and I've been in manufacturing for much longer than that. And the main thing that I bring about is human behavior. If you want to change cybersecurity, we have to educate people. We have to focus on how humans react to threats. So between the two of us, you'll find a good mix of how we approach cybersecurity. Now, I've been to many, many foundries, many manufacturing places. Now, the IT work tends to be segmented. There may be one CIO or IT vice president, but sometimes they don't look at all the computers, right? So there may be some special computers brought for a particular for equipment, and that's connecting with the interface with the internet, and sometimes the IT people don't know that. So there's some unique parts. There's almost like a patchwork of IT problems in manufacturing. Now, the bad actors know this, right? And they will leverage the fact that if it's a manufacturing company, there may be more holes there. So that's the point. And this is almost across the United States. Now, certain big companies are getting better there, but small companies are still lagging because there's a gap in the knowledge between IT and the manufacturing people. So we're going to talk about four topics, very straightforward. First one is the cybersecurity threat, how that threat has changed in the past 2 years, thanks to COVID-19. Second, we'll talk about a well-known framework, NIST cybersecurity defense framework, is well known to the cybersecurity community, but it's not very well known outside that community. Very simple, very logical. We'll talk more about that. Then we'll show you how to use that, right? How to correct, and then cost savings. So those are the four topics that we're going to talk. And this is a presentation you can look multiple times. Share this with other people also. One of the biggest things that we cybersecurity people don't do is talk to our team about cybersecurity threats and issues. We wait for them to find it through newspapers and TV media, which blow these out of proportion. So take time to talk about these trends: spear phishing, business email compromise, ransomware. Explain to people that breaches happen because of poor perimeter defense, right? And there's very little cybersecurity training that happens outside IT. So we need to train people on that. We need to tell people that, hey, a lot of the problems come not from within, from outside the network. It's insider threat that's equally important. Credentials, what do people steal? And in manufacturing especially, we have a lot of proprietary information, drawings and things like that, that, that get stolen. And cybersecurity threat happens primarily because we don't invest in the right technologies, we don't train people. And so this is where we need to be aware of what needs to happen. Okay, here are some predictions, right? Work from home attacks will take place more. Right? Most people in manufacturing say, but most of my people are working in the factory. they can't log on from their home. Think about it. Your president, vice president, senior level people often still log on using VPNs. Okay. Ransomware. It's not just about paying the ransom, right? Once data leaks take place, you have to inform the right people depending on which state you are. Right? Password compromise. If you haven't changed your password in 60 days or 90 days, guess what? It's likely that your password has been compromised and it's available out there. Manufacturing people, the IoT networks are really a big problem. Uh, it, it People don't spend enough time looking at the devices and any controls that are there. $6 trillion is about expected to be lost in 2021. So what's the good news? NIST, the government authority, has a beautiful cybersecurity defense network. It's well known to most cybersecurity people, but outside the cybersecurity community, it's not known. And the good news is it's very logical. Identify, hey, what are your business objectives? What are your key assets? Right? Protect. How do you put controls in place? Detect. When bad things happen, how do you detect that? How do you respond to attacks? And then recover. All of us go through that process. So it's a very simple framework. Download it from the website there, and you should be good to go.
Unless you have an IT cybersecurity professional on staff, it might be helpful to use some alternative tools to evaluate yourself rather than attempting to both learn and then implement the NIST cybersecurity defense framework. So we have some suggestions for you. The first one is a NIST cybersecurity defense framework risk assessment. This is a survey that you fill out with a cybersecurity professional, and from that it generates a report. This only takes about an hour. This is the easiest and probably the best way to start. Going beyond that though, you can do a cyber health checkup. It's a self-assessment again. I have it on the next slide as a sample for you. I do recommend involving a cybersecurity professional to go through it with you to make sure you understand how you're answering those questions, and they can help you score yourselves. Again, this will provide you a list of some of the highest risk areas so that you can attack those first. Next is you can have a third party come in and do a network and security assessment. Now these assessments are an actual network scan. You work with them, they set up the scan, you do it together, and then it runs off and gathers information about your entire network. And from that, we'll generate up to 20 different reports, everything from executive level through technical, which is an amazing checklist for things for you to do. Even better would be to implement this on a quarterly practice. You then give those technical reports to your technical team and allow the technical team to remediate as much as they can before the next quarter. Now, once you're starting to get really serious, then you want to do an actual NIST audit. Have a third party come in and evaluate where you are at using the NIST framework for improving critical infrastructure security. This is a very specific set of controls which goes through not only the virtual world, but the physical, meaning like your server room security and building security and so on, as well as procedures and processes. Like what procedures do you have for an employee addition or termination, or if someone gets promoted? How do you address those controls? It's all part of the audit. From there, you'll get a report which shows you the actual gaps in your cyber health, which you can then work on. These are typically done on an annual basis and are more extensive. This is a couple of week process. Additionally, you can add into your toolbox here some vulnerability scan, both on the internal network as well as the external network. These are not as serious as, let's say, a penetration test, but they are extremely effective in helping you identify your highest risk items. And then finally, the creme de la creme would be to do an actual penetration test, whether that's on your external perimeter or if it is on some of your applications. As promised, here is a sample cyber health checkup that you can use to score yourselves. I recommend using your IT people and a cybersecurity person to help answer the questions. You go through, score yourself, and then total it. If you're below 70, you have a lot of work to do. If you're above 90, However, you're in pretty good shape and you probably want to look at more mature measurements such as the NIST audit. In order to enact the cybersecurity initiatives that we need to, we are going to need to find some cost savings so that we can support that. And this is actually not that hard of a process. First, we'll start by looking at your IT support structure. We'll look at how are you spending your dollars on IT support, whether that's internal, whether that's a co-managed environment, or whether you're fully outsourced. We will take into account all of those and what you should have to create a gap analysis. What we also want to do is to optimize our flexibility in those support costs to match your overall business. Is your business expected to trend upwards? Is your business stale or is your business declining? Instead of having a fixed IT cost that doesn't change with your business needs, let's move towards one that is very flexible. Next, you look at all of your recurring agreements that are in any way related to IT. Internet service is a cost which should be declining every year. If it's not, we need to relook at how we are negotiating those contracts. Our voice services is another area that in general, voice services, if done the old way, are increasing every year, sometimes 10, 20, 25%, whereas really they should be the same or declining. So definitely want to take a look at voice services. As your business changes, you're using more Zoom, you're using less phone calls, you may find yourself in need of a significant shift in how you utilize voice, and that could give a significant savings. Office 365 for email and other collaborative tools, as well as other cloud services, have this monthly cost associated with them, and you need to make sure that you are paying for what you need, only what you need, and that you understand any changes that may occur. Ideally, these costs should mirror your staffing of your business pretty close to one. This way, as you add staff, you know exactly what your incremental cost will be. As you have to let go of staff, you know what your savings will be. Next is service contract audits. These are things like printer maintenance and repair and so on. Again, we want to take a look at those. We want to make sure that they're not automatically escalating. We want to make sure that they are monitored and potentially renegotiated. If you've made some major changes in your business, especially over the last 12, 14 months, you're going to find that perhaps some of those you're paying too much, and it's time to renegotiate those. And then finally, just general contract negotiations. You may have a variety of miscellaneous contracts that have to do with IT, not covered above, and we'll want to take a look at those to see if there's any savings to be had. Now, moving down to the IT infrastructure, having an actual hardware lifecycle review. Where are you in the spectrum of needing to replace equipment? Many companies just spent a lot of money on their equipment over the last 12 months. However, some companies still have not. And they are getting to the point where hardware failures are going to increase in frequency and impact. And we need to take a look at that and see if they are being managed in a proper way. Capital versus operating expense. In the old world, manufacturers focused always on trying to move everything into a capital expense. It's a very old way of thinking, and it is not always in their best interests, because by taking a capital expense or a quote unquote one-time expense and dragging that out for many years past where it should be seems like a very frugal and effective way of managing costs. But what is missing there is analyzing what your labor costs are. Because as your equipment ages, the increase in IT support increases. And at some point, if you push it too long, you then get into failures. And those failures can have many multiples of cost in order to recover. So instead of saving money, often you're losing money, or you're spending way too much. So we need to take a look at that. And then 5-year IT cost planning is to actually extend all of your expenses, look at them across 5 years. Where am I going to have bubbles in capital expenses? Where can I optimize it? And quite frankly, by doing this exercise, you will identify your costs much better than you probably do today. And you can monitor that from year to year to make sure that these costs that are supposed to be flexible are flexible. In this example, we had a 350 user manufacturing facility. They had 2 locations and 5 full-time equivalent IT staff. These staff were doing infrastructure as well as programming on their ERP system. Their total payroll is about $39,000 a month. What we did with them is we moved them to a co-managed model. So there's an outsourced IT firm as well as some internal staff. The internal IT staff reduced down to 2. That was one person who could take care of general low-level help desk type items, and the other person who was dedicated to programming the ERP system. Their new costs in total were $15,500 for payroll, $15,000 for the outsourced, and that brought them to $30,500. That is a savings of $8,500 per month, every month, ongoing. Now, under the recurring agreements, we took a look at their telecommunications, and simply by calling the provider and having a conversation with them about the fact that we were shopping for an alternative, we were able to drop $700 a month off of their bill. With their voice services, it was somewhat similar, but this time we wanted to get away from the copper-based phone lines that they used to have. Those costs were going up about 20% per year, every year, and their equipment was ancient and failing. There was a big pile of broken phones in the server room. So what we did is we got them a brand new VoIP-based system, all new handsets and equipment. We rolled that all into a new agreement, and we were able to save $500 per month, including all new hardware. In 3 years, once that hardware is paid off, there will be even more savings. Next, we did an audit of their Office 365 and other cloud services. We're able to get over $1,000 in savings there, in many cases simply by removing a license from a user who was no longer with the organization. It was an incredibly easy exercise. Next is we started going through their contracts for IT. We found 3 that were auto-renewed during the pandemic. They didn't realize it. There was a significant upcharge when the auto renewal hit. So we made a few phone calls and quite easily were able to secure $2,500 a month in savings off of those agreements, in particular with their managed print vendor. Their managed print vendor had a 10% escalation, and they printed an all-time low last year. So that was a great finding. Next, we went through their other IT contract negotiations with their other vendors, and basically just because we were doing less business, we were able to drop another $5,000 a month in savings, and from a cost savings there, totaled up is $98.25. So in total, we have over $17,000 a month in savings. Now, what did we need to do with that? Now, first of all, if you go to the infrastructure section, their server hardware was a mess, which is very common with manufacturers. They think they can extend the life of the servers well past the 5 years, which is a high end on servers. And what we ended up doing is replacing some of those servers, moving some of them to the cloud, and simply retiring other servers. But we didn't have to increase any savings because we were going to be able to use that $17,000 a month. So within 2 months, we paid for the majority of those changes. Next, we also looked at capital versus operating expenses and of each of their core business applications. And in their case, it made sense to keep the ERP system in place on premise. However, they are evaluating the next version of their platform, which in a year or 2 they will move to, which will then allow us to further shrink their server infrastructure before the next replacement of that equipment. And finally, we put in a 5-year IT cost plan. So the whole budget for 5 years is plotted out, so there's no surprises. Enclosed is a list of our sources so that you can dive further in depth on any topic you'd like. Thank you for watching our presentation. We're going to open it up to questions now.